In a talk at the 2012 Game Developers Conference, Sid Meier, creator of the Civilization series of strategy games, discusses the critical need not for just choices, but meaningful choices in games to create compelling experiences. A choice can be defined as when the player has two or more options available to them. This could be taking a left turn rather than the right while exploring the world of Elden Ring, what cards you play in a turn of Magic: The Gathering, or whether you block high or low in a Street Fighter match. A meaningful choice, on the other hand, is one where the player has some knowledge about the implications or trade-offs involved. Using my third example of blocking in Street Fighter, the choice would be considered meaningful if the defending player knew that blocking high would leave them vulnerable to low attacks, and blocking low would open them to overhead attacks. Knowing the possible risks and rewards involved, the player commits to one of the possible choices. When the player is successful or not, the very process of making these meaningful choices would be compelling or even outright enjoyable. This is where I crowbar in Punishing Greyraven. Punishing Greyraven has some interesting additions to the action game formula. The developers at Kuro consciously deviated from the genre's norm, and these deviations help give the game its identity and appeal. Before I can go into specifics, the basic gameplay must be covered. At time of writing, every playable character in PGR is a variant upon the same basic framework. Each one has a recharging dodge, a basic attack that can be done repeatedly to make a combo, a super attack that must charge up, and 3 unique attacks tied to the ping system. The ping system is essentially a one-row match 3 game. As you perform basic attacks on enemies, symbols, or orbs, of 3 separate colors appear in a row at the bottom of the screen. When you choose to activate one of these on-screen orbs, it disappears, and your current character performs the associated move. Once the orb disappears, the remaining orbs slide to the right to fill any otherwise empty spaces. Up to 3 adjacent orbs of the same color can be activated or pinged simultaneously, with more orbs activating a more powerful version of the move. This is a curious system for an action game, a strange genre fusion that adds complexity and can distract players from the whole attacking and dodging thing, but it does serve a few important purposes. A common issue for many is the near compulsion to maximize efficiency, even at the cost of enjoyment. In action games, this can take the form of exclusively using a move more powerful than the others, or running away from enemies only to attack them from a distance, using ranged attacks. For players who feel the need to take advantage of everything at their disposal, this can create a bland, repetitive experience. Games such as Devil May Cry and Bayonetta use a scoring system that rewards variation and creative play, encouraging players not only to complete, but to perform. At time of writing, PGR's most common game modes lack any such incentive. Even the opposite. Rewards can be gated behind either higher score requirements, scores that not only encourage the most efficient playstyles, but they're even sometimes placed on a public leaderboard. To use the previous example, using a character's most powerful move over and over again would be nigh mandatory if the developers did not account for this issue. Thankfully, the people at Kuro did just that. Enter the color-matching ping system. Even a single orb ping does significantly more damage over time than your default attacks. The player, however, is forced to include normal attacks in order to gain orbs in the first place. Not to mention that the color of each orb acquired is randomized, meaning that the player must be constantly aware of the orbs they receive. This goes even further with the team system. Players control one character at a time, but may at any time switch their characters with one of the other 2 from their team, with a cooldown put on the character who is just off the field. When being swapped onto a field of play, a character immediately performs a 3-orb ping attack, gains 4 random orbs, and resets the gauge that limits their dodge. While experienced players can clear missions using a single underpowered character, it is almost always easier and more effective to fully utilize your full team of 3. These factors combined create a powerful motivation to utilize a character's complete moveset to its fullest, which in turn leads to more meaningful decisions. Imagine a simple battle scenario in Punishing Greyraven, where the player must defeat as many enemies as they can within a time limit of 4 minutes. The faster a wave of enemies is defeated, the sooner the next will arrive. the player is performing well at the challenge, until the remaining time reaches 1 minute. At this point, they must judge the timing of attack, and one of their 3 characters has received significant damage. These are a few options available to the player. 1. Do not change strategy. Keep using the damaged character and maximize damage output, but risk losing the character to another attack. While the player can finish the challenge with only 2 or even 1 character left, their absence will significantly decrease the party's potential damage and survivability. A risky but potentially rewarding choice. 2. Change to a more defensive playstyle. Try to engage enemies that are alone or at range. Bait attacks and generally avoid being surrounded. This focus on defense will sacrifice damage output, but will be more likely to ensure the full team can still work together. Not as much risk, but also not as much reward. 3. Switch to a character with healing abilities and attempt to recover some health. This would allow the player to use their previous character with less risk, but characters capable of healing have some weaknesses to compensate for their abilities, often lacking in outright damage themselves. Less risk, but guarantees a loss in performance. This is but one slice of the constant series of choices a player will receive during gameplay. Rarely does a second go by in an intense battle where some deciding factor of success is not in jeopardy. It's a race to solve problems before the next one sneaks up behind you. A dance of spinning plates where a moment's hesitation will mean defeat. Truly a compelling system that has me thinking about it well after playing.